Hi, welcome today. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Megan McCarthy Collins with McCarthy and Cox. Today, we're presenting Savvy Women, Savvy Investors, and it's the next workshop in our series geared towards women. Before we jump into our presentation today, I wanted to let you know that in October, coming up next month, we're hosting a workshop for Honda associates that are approaching retirement. So look for more information. You can register for that at mccarthyandcox.com, our website. For today, really excited about the presentation that we have for you. I want you to jot down this email as a way to send us questions as they come up throughout the presentation. That email is info, I-N-F-O, at mccarthyandcox.com, all spelled out. So as you have questions today, please jot them down, shoot us an email at the end of the presentation. We'll take some time. We've set aside that time to go through those questions. And we'll ask Sheridan, and she'll help us get some answers, connect us with resources, give us some ideas as a follow-up, as part of the presentation today. So without further ado, today we have Sheridan Culhane from MFS presenting for us, Savvy Women, Savvy Investors. She's a business development consultant at MFS Investments, and she provides management solutions to financial advisors, helps create educational content like we'll hear from today. MFS has been around since 1924. It is known in the industry for inventing the mutual fund. Sheridan has been with MFS for over 8 years and is a member of the National Speakers Association. And we're really pleased to have her and to present. So welcome, Sheridan.
Thanks, Megan. I love getting together for women's events. I have 3 sisters, I have a daughter, I have a niece. So this is kind of my comfort zone. It feels like home to me. And it's something that I'm really passionate about. Over 80% of women say they don't know how to invest or to choose a financial product, that they wouldn't call themselves a quote investor. But let me ask you this. How many of you have some sort of retirement account? Doesn't matter if it's an IRA, 401k, Roth, 403b. Do you have one? Then you are an investor right now. You don't have to be a stock picker or constantly making trades in your account in order to be one. That's just one form of investing. You don't have to do it that way. In studies, they actually show that women's portfolios tend to perform slightly better than men's over the long term because they don't mess with it as much. So right now, with that retirement account, you are an investor. You've been doing it for years. It isn't scary, intimidating, or complicated. It just may feel that way sometimes because we as women, we've been systematically cut out of the conversation for decades. Now, what I have in front of me here is an excerpt from a home economics textbook from back in the 1950s. And this is what women were taught in school. This is what they were told to do and aspire to be. I'm going to read you 3 of my favorites. So first, make him comfortable. Have a cool or warm drink ready for him. Have him lean back in a comfortable chair or suggest that he lie down in the bedroom. Arrange his pillow and offer to take off his shoes. Speak in a low, soothing voice. Allow him to relax and unwind. That's all one rule. Number 2, minimize all noise. At the time of his arrival, eliminate all noise from the washer, dryer, or vacuum. Encourage the children to be quiet. And then we have some do nots. Don't greet him with problems and complaints. Don't complain if he's late for dinner. Count this as a minor problem compared to what he may have gone throughout the day. Now, whenever I read those, I'm reminded of some advice that my grandmother gave to me when I first got married. She told me that if I was ever running late preparing dinner for my partner David, that I should throw onions and garlic into a boiling pot of water because then it would at least smell as if dinner is on its way. Yep. So thank goodness for me and for all of us here, the 1970s came because that's when things really started to change for women as people challenged those old rules and women started entering the workforce. And if we compare back then to now, things they have changed. Women are now out earning men in terms of college degrees and advanced degrees. Women used to make up only about 30% of the workforce. Now it's close to 60. And almost 30% of women are their family's primary breadwinner compared to the 11% that it used to be. So things are changing, which is great. But the reality is that they're not changing fast enough because 90% of us, of women, will be solely responsible for their financial future at some point throughout their lives. Majority of the time, this happens as a result of a loved one passing or a relationship ending, meaning after a death or a divorce, because we as women, we live longer and because of the high divorce rates. From reading studies and from speaking with women of all ages all across the country, I cannot tell you how many have said how difficult it was to not only deal with that loss, but then on top of it, to have to wrap their head around their financial situation, most for the first time in their entire lives. How many regretted not getting involved sooner? How many wish that they could have learned on their own terms, right? Because they wanted to, rather than because they were forced to. So that's why I'm really excited that you're all here today. You're choosing to be part of this conversation right now. So my goal is to build your financial confidence by providing you some information about things that can go wrong for women at different life stages. So you can make the choice to have these conversations now. Understand where you are, that you have options, and how McCarthy and Cox can help you decide what's most appropriate depending on your personal and financial goals. And because we are women, and we still tend to take on all of those caregiving responsibilities in addition to everything else that we have on our plates, we're going to cover it all. We're going to talk about how to raise financially capable kids and grandkids, better understanding and maybe even anticipating the needs of your parents as they age. And finally, we'll talk about you. Are you prepared for some of the things that may come your way? It's a lot, so let's get into it. First up, grab a pen or maybe pull up a notepad. For those of you with kids or grandkids in the 8 to 18 range, I have two book recommendations for you. The first is called Raising Financially Fit Kids by Jolene Godfrey. Raising Financially Fit Kids by Jolene Godfrey. And this one teaches parents how to teach their children about the value of an earned dollar. So they don't go and blow all of their babysitting money on candy like I used to do growing up. It has all sorts of tips, strategies, and games, things that you can do with kids to teach them more about money as they grow up. The other book is meant for the older end of the spectrum, 13 to 18-year-olds, and it's called The Official Money Guide for Teenagers. The Official Money Guide for Teenagers. And this one covers everything. saving, spending, investing, budgeting, right? All these really important concepts that you want to expose children to from a young age. That way they sort of have that foundation to then build off of. For those of you with kids or grandkids in the 18 to 25 range, there are two big financial mistakes that young adults make. The first is not understanding what impacts their credit. And the second is not taking advantage of their retirement plan through work. For the credit score, you want to talk to your kids about what it is and how to maintain a healthy one. So things like paying bills on time, keeping balances low, only opening up credit when you need it, the difference between a hard inquiry and a soft inquiry, and most importantly, to actually check it. They want to do it once a year, and it's free to do that one time. Most credit card or issuers, they offer it for free nowadays. I know I can request mine on one of my mobile apps, but there are also some free credit scoring websites available. Two of them are up on the screen right now, creditkarma.com and annualcreditreport.com. For the retirement account, you want to make sure that you talk to your kids about signing up for whatever plan their company offers, if they offer one, especially if there's any sort of matching element to it. They're literally leaving money on the table if they don't take advantage of those. You want to talk about stepping up or increasing their contributions every single time that they get a raise, with the end goal of maxing that out each and every year. These retirement plans, they really are a simple way for young adults to start accumulating wealth and then begin to experience the power of compounding returns. For those of you who are or have kids or grandkids in the 25 all the way up to 40 or even 50 range, another good book for you. It's called Simple Wealth, Inevitable Wealth by Nick Murray. Simple Wealth, Inevitable Wealth by Nick Murray. And this one is really meant for people that know that they should be saving for their future, but they may not know how or where to start. So he talks about the importance of things like patience, discipline, and keeping a long-term perspective. It's a simple read, but a really important one for anyone that's looking to learn more about successful money management. Now, when it comes to our kids, we're prepared to take care of them, right? We understand or can anticipate this responsibility. What's catching a lot of people off guards is the need to care for their aging parents. Odds are your parents are going to need your help. 68% of Americans believe that they're going to be able to rely on their families to meet their long-term care needs. And 92% of people that are caregivers, they're also financial caregivers, whether that's through directly contributing to the costs for care or through managing the family finances. Now, estimates for these costs, they range. It depends on where you are and the type of care that you're going to receive. But I looked up some estimates the other day. A home health aide on average costs about $4,000 a year. A private room at an assisted living facility is right about the same, $4,000. A semi-private room in a nursing home is $7,750 a month, while a private room is about $1,000 more, $8,800 a month. Now, I'm not saying these numbers to scare you. That's not my intention at all. What I'm trying to do here is prepare you. Because too often, for years, what happens is we hear parents say something along the lines of, "We're fine. Everything's fine. We're good." And you leave the conversation at that, only to then have them show up at your doorstep at 75 or 82 without a dollar to their name. And majority of the time, that door that they end up knocking at is that of a daughter or a daughter-in-law. Because despite how far we've come as women, traditional caregiving responsibilities, they still tend to fall on our shoulders. So to prevent yourself from being blindsided by these costs, or even just to that responsibility later in life, as so many are, my suggestion for you would be to start these caregiving conversations with your loved ones right now. Have them early and have them often. You want to make sure that you know things like where their estate planning documents are and that they're in good order. You want to ask them for logins and passwords to different accounts. That way, if they slip and fall and are stuck in the hospital for a few days, you can continue to pay bills for them. You want to ask them what they want to do with their pets, where they hide the spare keys, where they want to live. And you need to know what financial resources that they have. The longer that you wait to start these conversations, the more difficult they tend to get. Now, if you've already been met with some resistance, or if you're just getting to the point where you're about to start having them, a good book to check out. It's called How to Say It to Seniors by David Soley. The last name is spelled Solie. How to Say It to Seniors. And I've heard some people refer to this one as the quote, "what to expect when you're expecting" book for dealing with your parents as they get older. He's a geriatric psychologist and goes into some of the communication roadblocks that people hit when they're trying to help the elderly, which, if you haven't had to deal with yet, it can be a little bit of a frustrating situation because oftentimes what they say, it's very different than what they mean. So he talks about why seniors act the way that they do and how to most effectively deal with them, how you can help them without making them feel small. Now, so far, we've talked about how to raise financially capable kids. We've talked about how to help your parents as they get older. Now, let's get to my favorite part of this conversation, and that's you. How can you be more financially savvy? There are three great challenges that we face in regards to our own security. The first is rising healthcare costs. The second is making good Social Security decisions. And the last is confidently knowing how to invest. Now, for those healthcare costs, no surprise to hear probably that costs, they are going up. In fact, they've about quadrupled in the past 50 years alone. But what we need to be concerned about as women is that we actually cost more. And it's not because we consume any more healthcare than a man in a typical year, but it's because we tend to live longer. Women outlive men by about 5 years. If you look at people in their 80s and older, for every one man, there are 2 women. For people in their 90s, for every one man, there are 3 women. And these extra years that we happen to live, they tend to be pretty expensive in terms of healthcare costs. The example on the screen has it averaging to about over $100,000. So something that you may want to consider to help mitigate these costs is long-term care insurance. 70% of people over the age of 65, they end up needing some sort of long-term care, but only a third of people over the age of 40 have money set aside to pay for it. That is a huge misbalance. So speak with McCarthy and Cox to see if long-term care insurance is something that may make sense for you and for your goals. Or if you know you're going to be one of those people that's financially responsible for their parents, this could also be something worth exploring. Another healthcare related expense that can sneak up on women and add to costs throughout retirement are changes to Medicare premiums. Now, because women live longer and because of the high divorce rates, many women are single or become suddenly single in retirement. And even though in either one of those cases, your income, it typically drops, the amount that you pay in Medicare premiums can actually pretty substantially go up because you go from filing married jointly to filing alone. It's not unheard of for people to go from paying no surcharges to paying something like an average increase of over 120%. Now, the key to controlling these costs is to pay attention to what increases your modified adjusted gross income and what doesn't, because that's what's going to impact what tax bracket that you're in and therefore what those surcharges are. So the solution to this is diversification. It's having tax-free, tax-deferred, taxable accounts. That way you have options for where you can get income from. A lot of times when we think about traditional retirement income options, we think of things like pensions, IRAs, dividends, Social Security, all of which increase your modified adjusted gross income. What people forget about are the things that don't. Things like HSAs, Roth 401ks, longevity and life insurance, non-qualified annuities. So make sure that when you're meeting with McCarthy and Cox, that you're speaking to them about all of your current holdings. That way they can make sure that you have this diversification and options for where to get income from throughout your retirement. Security issue number 2 is Social Security. Now, one of the biggest mistakes, in my opinion, that people over the age of 60 make is not fully understanding their Social Security options. And I get it. Social Security is complicated. How old you are, how long you've worked, how much you've earned, if you're single, married, divorced, remarried, widowed. Those are just some of the things that can impact your benefit options. Social Security really is one of those things that comes down to the specifics for each individual person. So while I can't walk you through everything, I will share with you 3 common and costly mistakes that I see people make. And the first is applying early. Now, in my house, we grew up with sort of the mantra, if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. If you're late, you're really late. So I always want to be early for things, right? Early in my mind, I associate that with good. Well, if you are trying to maximize your Social Security benefit, you may not want to be early. If you apply for Social Security at the age of 62 or any time before your full retirement age, which is likely age 66 or 67, depending on when you were born, you get a lower amount. You get a reduced benefit. This is true for your own benefit, the spousal, and the survivor. Number 2, this one is for divorcees. The general rule is that if you are married for 10 years or longer, you are eligible to receive the spousal and survivor benefits off of your ex or exes. So 10 years is the key. Now, I see this impacting people in two ways. The first, don't assume that the Social Security Administration knows everything, right? They may have no idea that you are married from the age of 21 to 31. You may not have even spoken a word to that individual since. You could still be entitled to that benefit. So remember, it's up to you to prove marriages and divorces. And the other way, and you can take this one or leave it, but it's the honest to goodness truth. I cannot tell you how many people, women in particular, have come up to me and told me that they wish that they knew about this 10-year rule because they would have held on to that marriage for an extra 2 years, 1 year, a couple months in some cases. It's 10 years or you get nothing. So just something to keep in mind. And the last one, this is for married couples. Now, it's really important that the highest income earner, whoever that is, that they understand how their decision as to when to apply for Social Security, how it will impact the surviving spouse for the rest of their life. Now, I had heard that before, but it didn't really click for me until one of my friends, Doug, told me about his grandparents. Now, Doug's grandfather applied for Social Security at the age of 62, knowing full well he was going to get a reduced benefit. But he had a reason. None of the men in his family had lived past the age of 67, so he wanted that money, and he wanted that money now. And sure enough, he passed away at the age of 67. But what he didn't realize was that him applying early locked his wife into a lower survivor benefit for the rest of her life. She was 2 years younger than him, and guess how old she was when she died? She was 103 years old. 103. So that seemingly small decision that he made, it ended up having an almost 4-decade impact on the surviving spouse. Now, I know that it sounds like I'm harping on Social Security a little bit, but it really is one of those things that can make a pretty big difference in terms of your quality of life in retirement, especially for women. 1 in 2 women rely on Social Security for over half of their retirement income needs. So your takeaway here should be to speak with your financial advisor before applying. Meet with McCarthy and Cox. Let them arm you with the questions and the information to bring to the Social Security Administration. That way you make sure that you get the maximum benefit that you're entitled to. All right, we're in the home stretch, confidently knowing how to invest. These are my top 10 rules, but I'm going to make it nice and easy for you and boil it down to my big 3. The first is diversify. Diversify, both in terms of the account types, like we talked about beforehand, and in terms of what you're investing in. Stocks versus bonds versus cash. Getting that mix right and managing it over time really is one of the best ways to make sure that you meet your long-term financial goals in a responsible way. Number 2, consider staying in the market even when scared. Now, I know that this one is much easier said than done. At our home office in Boston, they always have CNBC playing on all the monitors there. And people always joke that it stands for the constantly negative business channel because they always seem to be reporting one bad thing after another. Remember, the basic goal of every single investor is to buy low and sell high. For buying low, think about going into your favorite store and getting a shirt on sale. That's buying low. For selling high, think about your house. Ideally, you probably want to sell it for more than what you paid for it. That's selling high. Now, this makes sense, but when it comes to our investments and our money, we let our emotions get in the way and we tend to do the exact opposite. When we see those headlines about how great everything is, that's when we want to invest. And then when we see those scary ones, that's when we want to pull our money out and head for the hills. So resist this urge as best you can. Overreacting to market volatility really is one of those things that can delay or derail your retirement goals. Finally, it's the last one on this page, stay educated. You can give yourself a big check mark because showing up today means that you're already committed to this one. And a way that you can continue to do this into the future, there's a great website. It's called lightbulbpress.com. lightbulbpress.com. And they have all sorts of guides and brochures about different industry subject matter. And it's all written in a way that's really easy to understand. What's a stock? What's a bond? What's a mutual fund? Personal finance, estate planning. So once a year, come to the website, pick a topic, and order a workbook. What you'll do is you'll constantly raise your game in terms of what you know about the industry, which will help you become a way more confident investor. Now, I know that we've gone over a lot today in a short amount of time. We've talked about how to help your kids, how to help your parents, and how to help yourself. But my final ask is that you pick one. That's it. Out of everything that I went over today, pick one thing that you can do to put yourself in a better financial situation before the end of next month. Let McCarthy and Cox know what that one thing is so they can help you complete it. They have follow-up resources and material on every single one of the topics that I touched on today. That's what they're here for. It's why they're here. It's to help you and your family achieve your long-term financial goals, whatever those may be. Now, before we open it up for some Q&A, I had a friend send me over a different article from the 1950s the other day. And it's just as hilarious and horrifying as The Good Housewife Rules, but this one's called 129 Ways to Get a Husband. And it has tips like, wear a Band-Aid. People always ask what happened. Have your car break down at strategic places. Stand in a corner and cry softly. Chances are good that they'll come over to find out what's wrong. Get a sunburn. That's it. Nothing else, just get a sunburn. And finally, my favorite, stand on a busy street corner with a lasso. Very subtle. So thank goodness things have changed, right? I couldn't be more grateful for that. I hope you enjoyed our conversation today. I hope you learned something new. And with that, I hope you're leaving here with a smile on your face. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheridan. I know I heard a couple really key takeaways. Being savvy is about being involved and being aware. Big or small steps can lead to big wins, and taking that first step can really be impactful for future me. I know I also heard you say that minimizing those surprises, asking my parents for simple things like maybe where those extra keys are, where their power of attorney are, there's estate documents, can help minimize those surprises and some frustrations. And the other key takeaway I heard was really being around asking questions. So whether it's at work, am I maximizing my benefits? what's my spouse or partner doing? Are we on the same page around finances? Because chances are I'll be here, regardless of the age gap, if you know me personally, but chances are I'll be around probably longer, and then making sure I'm secure and financially sound is really important. So what I'd like to do is, we've gotten a couple questions sent over ahead of time and throughout the presentation today. So we'll go through those and kind of pick your brain. If as folks are listening, if a question comes to mind, we're not going to identify you and say it was Susie on 6th Street who asked the question. So don't hesitate, shoot those over to info@mccarthyandcox.com, and we'll be happy to go through those. One of the questions that we got, and thank you for all the really good information. I'll read it here. It says, I recently had my identity stolen, and it's been a really, really big hassle. I saw you mention Credit Karma, and I've used that to track my credit, but it's been up to me to notify all these credit cards and even the IRS about this issue. Is there anything that I could potentially do to minimize this if it happens again? Is there any type of insurance available?
So we actually have, I have a dedicated seminar very similar to what we did today, but it's all about cybersecurity and identity theft, because especially with all of us, the past year, the pandemic, we've seen a big spike in sort of cyber and online attacks. All of that being said, there definitely are some things that you can do. Reach out to McCarthy and Cox, and they can kind of specifically go through some ways that you can provide insurance. But one that I'm immediately thinking of is something like LifeLock or other services like that. Oftentimes, they do provide the monitoring for you, so you can take that worry off your plate. And many times they'll offer fund reimbursement if you fall victim to any of these scams. So there definitely are some options for you if this is a big concern. Reach out to McCarthy and Cox, and they can kind of go through your specific situation to see what makes the most sense.
Thank you. Yeah, the other thing that I would add is those standalone services like LifeLock. Another opportunity might be to check with your homeowner's insurance to see if they have an additional coverage to bundle it together. It's in one place. A lot of companies are also offering that as well. It's a good question. You talked a little bit about this, but I hope this next question reads, I'm taking care of my kids and I'm starting to help mom and dad out a little bit more. Is there anything I can do to focus on for myself so maybe I don't sandwich my kids as much as I age?
Yeah, pay yourself first would be a big, big goal that you should make for yourself. Even if it's a small dollar amount that you're putting away, let's say it's $25 a month. Keep doing it consistently. That way you're building towards the future. The way that you can commit to doing this, right? Maybe list out all of your budget and see where maybe you can cut back. Maybe it's making coffee at home every single day, and you'll be surprised as to how quickly those dollar amounts add up. But making yourself a priority, that way you don't become somebody else's responsibility or obligation in the future. It starts by taking some action right now.
Thanks, absolutely. A question that came across, really around kind of a credit score that you mentioned, you started off about something that sometimes folks mess up right out the gate. Once they graduate high school, they get all excited and rack up a bunch of debt. But this is on the other end. It says, after my spouse and I paid off our mortgage, it felt like our credit score fell. We're retired, but it's something we took a lot of pride in. Should we be really concerned about that? Or what are some things we could do to help get our credit score back up to where it previously was?
Yeah, this is funny. It's the same thing if like you want to close down one of your credit cards and you do, it actually ends up hurting you a little bit in the short term. So the way that the credit score works, it's by keeping that history. So the more that you pay off those obligations, the less amount of sort of history they have to go off of for keeping your credit score as high. Um, in my opinion, as long as you're not planning to get a loan or anything like that, then it really doesn't matter all that much because that's where it comes into play. But if you did want to sort of build that back up, if you take a personal pride in that, maybe you have a credit card, you open up one just for gas. Maybe you have another one where you do for any flights that you may book. And you obviously want to make sure that you're paying these continuously and that you don't open up too many of them because that can also have the negative effect. But my personal kind of opinion would be if you don't need the credit, don't worry about it.
Awesome. Absolutely. We spent a lot of time, or we heard some really good things about Social Security from you today. Somebody asked, how do I find out what my Social Security benefit is? And is there any reason I may want to consider working a few extra years? How does that calculation work if it's my own work history?
So you can go to SSA.gov. That's the Social Security website. I believe that you can kind of plug in each year what it is to see what your dollar amount is going to be. But in terms of specific dollar amounts, particularly if you're looking for like what your spousal benefit would be, they're not going to release that information until you're at least the age of 62. So what I always say is sort of think about your own benefit. And if your own benefit is greater than half of what your spousal would be, you're going to be estimating here, but you're going to get your own benefit. You're not going to be relying on the spousal one. So that would sort of be the best way that I could say that you could estimate your own. There are some certain requirements in terms of like you have to be working for at least 10 years in order to be eligible. Any years after that, there's a zero that gets plugged in. So many times it may make sense, especially if you're in your peak income earning years, for you to work a little bit longer, because then you're going to roll off some of those zeros or just roll off some of those lower annual figures from what you were making when you were maybe first entering the workforce.
Good points. Absolutely. This is kind of an Ohio tidbit specifically. We have a lot of folks who work as a public employee or maybe as a teacher that pays into our public teachers pension in the state of Ohio. Most of those folks don't pay into Social Security as well. So, what I would encourage those folks that fall into that, maybe it's themselves or a spouse, really thinking long-term between the two of you, what is the family income target? And what does it mean if maybe the spouse that paid into Social Security passes first? Is the surviving spouse eligible for any of that benefit, or is there going to be a gap? So working with a financial advisor that's aware of these rules, really understands how they connect and coordinate. That's something we do a lot of for folks here at McCarthy and Cox. That's a really important piece. And it's not always just what's on that statement. How do the rules apply to you and your family? And what's the best path for you is always really important. I've got time for a couple more questions. So if you have any that you're thinking of, don't hesitate to send those over. So another one has come over for us.
We've already gotten a lot of great ones.
Yeah. So this question says, most of the utilities we've just kept in my husband's name because it was easier when we moved. Could that be a challenge or a concern if he dies first, or if he, ends up in the nursing home? Is there anything you can speak to on that from your experience or information?
Yeah, I mean, typically they're all going to be underneath, it's going to be associated with like his Social Security. So if he does kind of pass away first, then the accounts are going to have to get renamed in underneath your name and underneath your Social Security number. So the way that works, at least in the state where I'm from, they only allow one person to be on those accounts. So it's sort of like you may have to deal with this at one point or another, but in general, changing utility things, those change all the time. Think about renters and things like that. So it's not that difficult to go through the process.
Awesome. Another question it talks about a dad in a nursing home. So, my dad is currently in a nursing home, and soon his resources will be used up and he won't be able to pay the bill. Can the nursing home force my siblings and me to pay that bill?
So this is where you want to make sure that you're meeting with a financial advisor to talk about all of the options here, because there are things like Medicaid may be able to come into the play and help you. But Megan, you may be better equipped to answer this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is anytime, nursing home resources, the idea antenna goes up around, is this a candidate or a situation where Medicaid can help with those costs? And the rules around Medicaid are state specific and really tricky. So working with an elder care attorney often is a path that people go down because you don't want to get the rules wrong. Also working with a financial advisor to understand what assets are available for your dad and can be a really good partner in navigating this situation can be a huge tool for you. The one piece, that's a really good to understand is anytime a parent goes into a nursing home, there's a lot of paperwork. So knowing what it is that you or your parent are signing is really important. That's where that attorney can be helpful, because if you sign a personal guarantee, you might be on the hook, but generally for the care of a parent, it's the parent's assets, so the parent's resources that go towards the cost of that care. A lot of people think, well, I'm on the hook to make sure dad's still comfortable. It's one thing to say I want to do it and I can afford it within my own resources and means, but it doesn't mean you have to. And again, elder care attorney is key, working with a financial advisor so you don't obligate yourself to something you don't necessarily need to pay can be really helpful, especially as we're trying to get our own foundation ready to go. So we have that financial independence as we age as well. I'm just going to check here to see if any other questions have come across. I think we've answered them as they've come in. So I really wanted to take a time to say thank you so much to Sheridan. We really appreciate your presentation today and MFS making it available to our clients and folks in our community. So thank you.
My pleasure. It was great to be here. And thank you for all those great questions. I like seeing the active audience.
Absolutely. For folks here with McCarthy and Cox, I really want to say again, thank you for spending, about an hour of your lunchtime or a day here with us. As you've registered, we're going to send this recording because today has been recorded. We're going to get the compliance okay, of course, but you'll receive an email with the recording of today's presentation. We hope you found it useful, and I know I'm taking away some really helpful information, jotted down those books that Sheridan mentioned. We asked or encourage you to share the link, the video, with folks you think also would enjoy it. There's a lot of great information. Keep an eye out as well for that October workshop, specifically geared towards folks with approaching retirement from Honda. That'll be a retirement quiz, 30 questions to get right before you retire from a Honda. That information will be available on our website, mccarthyandcox.com. So again, thank you so much for spending some time with us here today. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and we hope you have a great day. We really appreciate the opportunity to serve you here in our community.